So it's 7 o'clock on the Pacific time zone. It's 10 o'clock Eastern. So we wanted to start promptly. I know there are people still coming in, but I wanted to get going. So I want to thank all of you for coming and supporting this event. And I'd also really like to thank UNLV for allowing us to use their facility, which is quite lovely, however difficult to find. I want to thank the folks who have been here volunteering, Linda and On and Ricky and all the people who are, all these events that we do are put on with volunteers. So it's a labor of love for everyone. I'd like to thank them for their help. They've been helping me all weekend. This presentation is a follow-on to what I presented about a year ago in Washington on the deep national security state and the UFO and extraterrestrial issue. How many people saw that? And I'm just curious. So it's a good thing to look at. You may want to see it again in light of what I'm going to be sharing tonight. And what I want to share tonight is personally very difficult. And the reason it is that this issue and this presentation will be the most difficult one I've done in 26 years. It will be very controversial. It's, as a trauma doctor, an emergency doctor, I tell people I'm accustomed to giving folks bad news. So this is very, very bad news. And I'm not saying that to be at all melodramatic. I'm telling you what the truth is. And the only reason I'm doing this is that there have been information coming in, pinging my system, indicating that we're getting closer to the hoaxing of events to stampede the world into something that would make 9/11 look like a picnic. And there are a number of signs that have been mounting on this issue over the last 6 to 9 months. And I'm gravely concerned about it. So for that reason, without being able to say that anything is imminent, my philosophy has always been an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And in this case, it's an ounce of prevention is worth several billion planets worth of cure in terms of mass. Because if we can do what we should tonight and get the word out about this to the President-elect, to the incoming Director of Central Intelligence, to people in the Kremlin who are watching, to people all over the world, there's a chance we can avoid what I'm going to be discussing. So it's a bit like if you were to tell someone they have some signs for a massive heart attack, all right? And it's imminent. And you can do some things right now, prevent it. You can ignore it and have it and have a code blue where the heart stops and you have to be resuscitated. My goal here, using that medical analogy a little further, is to avoid the attack. And in this case, it would not be a medical emergency. It would be a national security and global emergency orchestrated by people who have been planning this since the 1950s. So what I'm going to be discussing is what in the parlance of the Pentagon, CIA, counterintelligence programs is known as a false INW, or a deceptive INW, or indication and warning. And some years ago, I had a meeting, and it's pop culture, we call it false flag. Some years ago, I had a meeting with the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and General Patrick Hughes, and the focus of that briefing, which was quite extensive, was to give him information so that he would not be deceived in the event of a false or deceptive INW, indication and warning, dealing with the UFO and ET issue. As it turned out, the general had no knowledge of either the UFO issue, the extraterrestrial issue, or the fact that there was already afoot, planned since the 1950s, a program, a longitudinal, long-term, multi-generational program to hoax a threat from outer space when there was none, or is none. This was something that the general was very concerned about, because prior to the meeting I'd sent a briefing through courier to the general. He's a 3-star. And he was unaware of any of these issues. And he sort of mirrored what he said, almost word for word, what the first director of the CIA that I briefed in 1993 said, and that is, I have made inquiries into this issue, but I have been provided no information. And at that point, he goes over to a bookshelf in the meeting room for the general, which is in the E ring of the Pentagon, picks up a doll, a little E.T. doll, looks like one of those little things you get at a toy store, and he held it up, and he was, with great anger, said, "This is all I have gotten for my inquiries on the UFO issue." And it was, of course, people making fun of him. And I said, yes, that's typical. However, there are people on your senior staff who are permanently assigned to this directorate, to being the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, whereas the director rotates, just like the CIA director rotates. And they know about it, but they're not telling you because they want to keep you in the dark. At that instant, a full bird colonel who was at the briefing stiffened visibly and became quite agitated, but remained silent. And my military advisor and I afterwards compared notes and said, that man is the gatekeeper deceiving the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now that little vignette multiplied all throughout the dysfunction of governments around the world. And so you have people who often, you would think, who would have knowledge of these issues. And it turns out they do not. And then there are other people who should have nothing to do with something this sensitive, who are running the projects outside constitutional oversight of the President, the Congress, and their appointees, and of we, the people, most importantly. This is why Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, the first CIA director when it was formed in 1947, took the place of the OSS, said in a letter that the secrecy surrounding UFOs was a threat to the national security. This is why Eisenhower said the secrecy, unwarranted secrecy is what he said. It could be a threat to our democracy and our way of life. And they were referring to this dynamic. So what we have to do as the people, and I'm a citizen, I mean, contrary to rumors, I don't do anything except pro bono free briefings for people in government when they ask me because they found out, oops, this stuff is true, who can I go to and find out what's really going on? And I'll be called into a briefing. But the problem is, in that vacuum of secrecy, extreme, illegal, unacknowledged special access projects, which is what they're called, at a compartmented level, and I was talking to a gentleman today about this, at least 21 levels, compartments, past the level of the President. 21 levels. That you have a permanent infrastructure that has evolved or spun off from the legitimate government, but that is embedded within the corporate sector, the intelligence community, and the military sector, that has run amok viciously of our liberties and our freedoms, and have therefore been given no oversight or restraints so that they could set up a dynamic where they could hoax an alien attack on planet Earth. Now, this is going to be very complicated, and it's going to be the most complex presentation I've ever done. It's going to be intellectually dense, so we will take a break at the 2-hour point, stretch our legs, come back for some question and answers, because it's going to be heavy stuff. Now, I want to be really clear that when this I'm sharing is, I would not do it if I didn't think it could be avoided. I would just keep my mouth shut and retire. I think we can avert this. I think that we can avoid the heart attack, as it were, using the analogy I used earlier. And that's why I'm standing here before you. Otherwise, I would have given up on this in 1994 when I first learned of all of these issues. So in 1994, by that date, I had learned that there was a sub rosa, deep national security state operation, that had completely gotten out of control. So badly that when I brought this up to the general who was in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes, he said, yes, my father in the 60s knew of such a thing that had happened. We all thought he was a kook. We didn't believe him. He says, it wasn't until I got into this command as head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is almost as big as the CIA, maybe bigger. That's the Pentagon shop for intelligence versus CIA civilian. And he said to me that, that his father eventually committed suicide over this issue. So, very heavy. I mean, this is 10 minutes into the briefing. This 3-star general sharing this intimate and devastating fact. And I said, well, I can understand that. You know, I mean, a lot of people have. So I said, but we can't, and he said to me, he says, how have you stayed in this game? I said, I put my vision on the far horizon. And the far horizon is that we're going to make it through this in fits and starts, and we're going to have a new civilization begin on this planet, the hallmark of which is a peaceful planet on Earth, living peacefully with these other planets. Now, to get from where we are now, which is that criticality, we would call it medically, to get from criticality now to that point is going to be a very heavy lift. But he said to me, he said, well, I'm glad you have that hope, because otherwise I don't know how you haven't eaten your gun. That's what he said. I said, well, it's not my style anyway. But I said, but the point is that there's no point in despairing, because what I have seen, and this is the part of me that's sort of the spirit warrior and my lucid dreams of the future, is a future where these issues have resolved. We have a peaceful civilization here. There's free energy running the planet. There's anti-gravity systems, so we move above the surface and don't need surface roads. Poverty is ended. There is complete economic and social justice in the world, and a sustainable, clean planet that becomes a level 1, as Michikaku would say, planet that can go forward and go into space peacefully. That's what I see happening. And within my lifetime, and I'm kind of an old guy now, so when I started this project, I was 34, and I'm 61. So I point out to people, this has been, you know, a 26, 27-year period of work, and it pulled me out of my work as an emergency doctor because I realized that we were in a global emergency. And that's why I left medicine. Get it? I mean, I went from one emergency to another. So it's sort of a dharma, a path of service to be involved in an emergency. So, but the cosmic false flag that I want to talk about is the crown jewel of the secrecy that was hatched in the 50s that led to Eisenhower losing control of these programs. And no president since that time has had full operational access control. They've had knowledge, but not control over these rogue elements. So now we're 60 years into a period where these operations have run amok, so much so that it has become an existential threat to life on Earth. And this is something we have to understand what the modus operandi is. What are the means for achieving this goal? And I was asked today by a gentleman I was meeting with, he says, when do you think they might do this? I say they began in 1950 some. It's already happened. It's already happened. The false flag has already happened. Now,